Section 81 of American State Trials, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. American State Trials, Volume 2 by John D. Lawson. Trial of Alexander Arbuthnot for inciting Indians to war, Florida, 1818, Part 3. The President. Have you at any time within the last 12 months heard any conversations between the prisoner and the chief called Bowlegs relating to the war between the United States and the Seminoles? Heard the prisoner tell Bowlegs that he had sent letters to the Prince Regent and expected soon to have an answer. Sometimes afterwards, some of the Negroes doubted his carrying those letters when the prisoner stated that he had, but the distance being great, it would take some time to receive an answer. First saw the letter signed A. Arbuthnot, dated April 2, 1818, referred to in the first specification and the second charge, about the 6th of April, when a black man, who said he had received it from an Indian, gave it to Mr. Armbruster, whom I saw reading it. It was conveyed to Suwanee by an Indian, who was sent from Fort St. Mark. Do not know who paid the Indian for carrying it. The President. What steps were taken by the Negroes and Indians upon the receipt of the letter? They first believed the bearer to be an enemy and confined him, but, learning the contrary, began to prepare for the enemy and the removal of their families and effects across the river. The Indians lived on the opposite side. The Indians and Negroes did not act together in the performance of military duty, but they always said they would fight together. Nero commanded the blacks, and was owned and commanded by Bowlegs, but there were some Negro captains who obeyed none but Nero. The ammunition, which was sold by the prisoner to the Indians and Negroes, was brought to Suwanee by the schooner Chance, now lying at this wharf. She is a fore-topsail vessel belonging to the prisoner. April 28th. Peter B. Cook, to the prisoner. Have been acquainted with the settlements on the Suwanee between 6 and 7 months. To the President. I engaged to live with the prisoner for no stated period. I was taken by the year. He told me he had no farther use for me after I had written the letters to Providence. After I was discharged, I stayed in a small house belonging to a boy called St. John, under the protection of Nero. After being refused by the prisoner a small venture to Providence, I wrote my friends for the means to trade by myself. Don't believe the prisoner had knowledge of the venture's being on board the schooner. It was small and in my trunk. Do not know that Armbruster was the agent of the prisoner. The President. Do you think that the powder and lead shipped would be more than supplied the Indian and Negro hunters? Did not see the powder and lead myself, but was told by Bowlegs that he had a great quantity he had there keeping to fight with. The Indians resided on the east side of the river. The President. You asked if the Negroes and Indians, when the letter marked A was communicated, did not take up arms. Had they received information of the defeat of the Indians at Miccosukee prior to that time? It was afterwards, I believe, they received the information. Bowlegs had other powder than that got from the prisoner. He had some he had got from the bluff, which was nearly done. He said his hunters were always bothering about powder. At the time Armbruster ascended the river, there was no other vessel at the mouth of the river. The President. There is a letter A spoken of. How do you know that the son of the prisoner had that letter in his possession? I saw him with it, which he dropped, and a boy, called John, picked up and gave to me. The President. You stated that the Indians and Negroes doubted the fidelity of the prisoner in sending letters to the Prince Regent. Do you think the prisoner would have been punished by them had he not complied with their wishes? I do not know. Do not believe the prisoner was compelled to write the Indian communications. William Hambley. I heard the chief say, the prisoner objected to hearing evidence of that kind. The court, after consideration, decided that the prisoner's objection was not valid. William Hambley. 15 or 20 days after the prisoner arrived at Ocleochnee, the Seminole Indians began to steal horses from the United States settlements and committed murders on the Santilla River, which, I was informed by them, was at the instigation of the prisoner. The chiefs of the little villages in my neighborhood then desired me to write a few lines to the prisoner, stating those reports, and that I did not know that those Indians he was exciting had long been outlawed, and cautioned him against such proceedings, or he might be involved in their ruin. This I did, when the prisoner wrote me a long and insulting letter, which was lost, upbraiding me for calling those Indians outlaws, and accusing me of exciting the Indians to cruel war. I was told by the chiefs and Indians who had seen the prisoner that he advised them to go to war with the United States if they did not surrender them the lands which had been taken from them, and that the British government would support them in it. The Indians who took me and Mr. Doyle prisoners on the 13th of December last told us that it was by the prisoner's order. On our arrival at Makasuke as prisoners, King Haja and all his chiefs told us it was by the prisoner's orders we were taken and robbed. On our arrival at Sewanee, we were told by the Indians and Negro chiefs who sat in council over us that the prisoner had advised that I should be given up to 5 or 6 Choctaw Indians who were saved from the Negro fort, who would revenge themselves for the loss of their friends at that place. On our return from Sewanee, the chief, King Haja, told us that he had got the prisoner to write several letters for him, one to the governor of Providence, one to the British minister at Washington, one to the Secretary of State in London, and one to the American agent for Indian Affairs, protesting against the proceedings of the officer at Fort Scott. While I was at Sewanee, the Indian chiefs told me that the prisoner had arrived at that place with 10 kegs of powder on board his vessel, and whilst at Fort St. Mark's, sometime in March, Helisago or Francis brought an order from the prisoner to the commandant for 2 kegs of powder, with other articles which were in his possession. The President: were any murders or depredations committed on white settlements by the Indians previous to the prisoner's arrival at Ocleochnee? None, except one at Fort Gaines, which was before or about the time of the prisoner's arrival. Have resided among the Indians 14 years, and have understood the language 12 years. Do not believe the Seminoles would have commenced the business of murder and depredations on the white settlements had it not been at the instigation of the prisoner, and a promise on his part of the British protection. The different chiefs always represented to me as an authorized agent of the British government. I recognized the letter marked G and signed A. Arbuthnot as being a copy of the one alluded to in my testimony as lost. To the prisoner: I have seen prisoner's handwriting, but cannot say I am acquainted with it. The letter marked G looks to be his handwriting, but I cannot say positively. The Indian chiefs told me the prisoner had reported himself to them as an English agent. When we were taken prisoners, the Indians told us that he had gone over to Providence, but was expected back by the time we should arrive at Sewanee. I requested King Haja to prevail upon the prisoner to give me a passage in his schooner to Providence, but was told the prisoner refused it, stating that, if we were forced upon him, he would blindfold us and make us walk overboard. King Haja stated that the prisoner was fearful of meeting with an American vessel, where we should be taken out, and he thereby lose his schooner. Clement Doyle: I know nothing that would substantiate the charges against the prisoner except from common report. William Fulton. The copy of the letters from A. Arbuthnot to General Mitchell, agent for Indian Affairs, dated Sewanee, January 19, 1818, and marked number 6, were acknowledged by the prisoner to be the same in substance as one written by himself at that time. Footnote, number 6, extract from a letter written by A. Arbuthnot to General Mitchell, American agent for the Creek Nation of Indians, dated Sewanee, January 19, 1818. In taking this liberty of addressing you, sir, in behalf of the unfortunate Indians, believe me, I have no wish but to see an end put to a war, which, if persisted in, I foresee must eventually be their ruin, and as they were not the aggressors, if in the height of their rage they committed any excesses, that you will overlook them as the just ebullitions of an indignant spirit against an invading foe. I have the honor to be, etc., A. Arbuthnot, by order of King Hyger and Bowlegs, acting for themselves and the other chiefs. End of footnote. To the prisoner. The prisoner acknowledged the letter just read to be a copy of one written by himself in the encampment before this place, about the 6th or 7th instance, while he was a prisoner. I heard a gentleman say that those who excited the Indians to the murder of the unoffending should feel the keenest edge of the scalping knife, but, as well as I recollect, that observation was not made until after the repeated acknowledgments by you of having written the letter. To the court. The confession of the prisoner to this letter was made voluntarily, and without any constraint whatever. The prisoner asked to call as a witness Robert C. Ambrister, against whom criminal charges had been filed, and who was in custody on account thereof. The judge advocate objecting, the court was cleared when it was decided that Robert C. Ambrister, in custody for similar offenses with the prisoner, could not be examined as evidence before the court. The evidence for the prisoner, John Lewis Phoenix, recalled. There were other vessels at the mouth of the Sewanee River when Ambrister seized my vessel. It was a sloop, and I understand Ambrister came in her, and that he came on board of his own accord. The President. Have you, since you commanded the prisoner's vessel, ever brought any arms to that part of the country? No, I brought a quantity of lead and 10 kegs of powder in the last trip. John Winslet recalled. As to the letter which I said was written by the prisoner to the little prince, after reading it I returned it to him, and believe it to still be in his possession, as Indians seldom destroy papers of that kind. The prisoner requesting some time to make up his defense, the court adjourned until tomorrow at 4 o'clock. April 28th. The recorder having read over the proceedings of the court with closed doors, the prisoner was recalled into court and asked to make his defense. Mr. Arbuthnot. May it please this honorable court. The prisoner arraigned before you is sensible of the indulgence granted by this honorable court in the examination of the case now before them. It is not the wish of the prisoner, in making his defense, to try the patience of the court by a minute reference to the voluminous documents and papers, or to recapitulate the whole of the testimony which has come before the honorable court in the course of this investigation. Nor is it the intention of the prisoner to waste the invaluable time of this court by appeals to their feelings or sympathy, though I am persuaded that sympathy nowhere more abounds than in a generous American breast. My only appeal is to the sound and impartial judgment of this honorable court, the purity and uprightness of their hearts, that they will, dispassionately and patiently, weigh the evidence they have before them, apply the law, and on these and these alone pronounce their judgment. If this honorable court please, I shall now proceed to examine the law and the evidence that is relied on by this honorable court in support of the first charge and specification. Winslet, a witness on the part of the prosecution, says the little prince showed him a letter written in June last, signed A. Arbuthnot, requesting his friendship with the lower nations of Indians. The same witness stated that he believed the letter now to be in the possession of the little prince. Here, may it please this honorable court, I will call their attention to the law relating to evidence. First, presuming that the rules of evidence are the same, whether in civil or military tribunals. McComb, 96. This point being conceded, the next inquiry is, what are the rules of evidence with respect to the admission of letters or papers of private correspondence in a court of criminal jurisdiction? May it please this honorable court, must you not produce the original letters and papers if they are not lost or mislaid, so that they cannot be obtained? And in case they are lost, proof must be made of the handwriting being the same as that of the original, before they can be received as evidence. McComb on courts martial. Peake's evidence. Gilbert's law of evidence. No instance can be cited where the copy of a letter was read as evidence, when the original could be obtained, much less the giving in evidence the contents of such letter from bare recollection. The only proof that this honorable court has of the existence of such letter being in the hands of any person, or its contents being known, is the vagrant memory of a vagrant individual. Make this rule of evidence, and I ask you, when would implication, construction, and invention stop? Whose property, whose reputation, and whose life would be safe? Here I would beg leave to mention a remark made by the president of this court in the course of this investigation, which was, that notwithstanding the letter was proved by the witness to be in the possession of the little prince, that this court could not notice this circumstance, because there was no means by which it could be obtained. I would ask the honorable court what means they have adopted, or what exertions have they made to procure this letter. If the honorable court please, I shall here close the defense of the first charge and specification, believing that they are neither supported by law or evidence. May it please the honorable court, I will now come to the second charge and specification of that charge. In support of this charge and specification, the evidence is a letter written to my son. If the court please, this letter was written in consequence of my property at Sewanee, and the large debts that were due to me from Bowlegs and his people. Nothing, I believe, of an inflammatory nature can be found on reading the document marked A, authorizing the opinion that I was prompting the Indians to war. On the contrary, if the honorable court will examine the document marked A, they will see that I wish to lull their fears by informing them that it was the Negroes, and not the Indians, the Americans were principally moving against. If the honorable court please, I will make a few remarks upon the second specification, and here close my defense. In proof of this charge, the court have before them the evidence of Hambly, Cook, and sundry letters, purporting to be written by myself to different individuals. May it please the court, what does Cook prove? Why, that I had 10 kegs of powder at Sewanee. Let me appeal to the experience of this court. If they think this quantity of powder would supply 1,000 Indians and an equal number of blacks more than 2 months for hunting. As to the letters named in this specification, may it please the court, the rules of evidence laid down in the first part of this defense will apply with equal force in the present case. It remains now, may it please the court, to say something as to Hambly's testimony, and may it please this honorable court, the rule laid down in this case as to hearsay evidence will be found without a precedent. A strong case was stated by an intelligent member of this court on the examination of this part of the evidence. That is, would you receive as testimony what a third person had said, whom, if present, you would reject as incompetent? Apply this principle to the present case. Could an Indian be examined on oath in our courts of judicature? If, then, the testimony of savages is inadmissible, Hambly proves nothing. Here, may it please this honorable court, I closed my reply to the charges and specifications preferred against me, being fully persuaded that, should there be cause of censure, my judges will, in the language of the law, lean to the side of mercy. The verdict and sentence. The doors were then closed, and after much deliberation on the evidence adduced, the court returned and announced that they found the prisoner, Alexander Arbuthnot, guilty of the first specification to the first charge, and guilty of the first charge, guilty of the second specification of the second charge, and guilty of the second charge, leaving out the words acting as a spy. They therefore sentenced the prisoner, Alexander Arbuthnot, to be suspended by the neck until he is dead, 2/3 of the court concurring. The judgment and sentence were communicated to the general commanding, Major General Jackson, and approved by him, who ordered that Brevet Major A.C. Fanning of the Corps of Artillery will have between the hours of 8 and 9 o'clock a.m. a Arbuthnot suspended by the neck with a rope until he is dead, agreeably to the sentence of the court. April 29th. Today at daylight, the prisoner was hanged from the yardarm of his schooner, the Chance. End of section 81.
Section 82 of American State Trials, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Brian Keenan. American State Trials, Volume 2 by John D. Lawson. The Trial of Robert C. Armbrister for Inciting Indians to War, Florida, 1818. The Narrative. The trial of Lieutenant Armbrister followed immediately that of the Scotch trader Arbuthnot. He was charged with inciting the Indians and with levying war. His case was different from that of Arbuthnot. He was an adventurer and had no ostensible business in Florida. He pleaded guilty, threw himself on the mercy of the court, and was condemned to be shot. His youth and prepossessing appearance pleaded so strongly in his favor that the court, on the appeal of one of its members, reconsidered its judgment, and commuted the sentence to 50 stripes on the bare back, and confinement at hard labor, with the ball and chain, for 12 months. But General Jackson disapproved the reconsideration, restored the first sentence, and ordered it to be carried out. And on the same morning that Arbuthnot was hanged from the yard arm of the Chance, Armbrister was shot by a detail of troops, without shift or appeal, betraying no little sorrow at being brought to so ignominious a death at the hands of a civilized captor. Great was the indignation against Jackson in England when the news reached there. He was denounced as a murderer all over the country. But Jackson's position, in his order confirming the sentence, "It is an established principle of the law of nations that any individual of a nation, making war against the citizens of any other nation, they being at peace, forfeits his allegiance and becomes an outlaw or a pirate," could not be gainsaid. And so the British government took no steps in relation to the execution, beyond an inquiry into the facts of their alleged complicity in the war. A British statesman said a little later that if the British ministry had but raised a finger, all England would have rushed to arms. General Jackson's troubles, however, were not over, for he had many enemies in Washington. There were several secret cabinet meetings, at which his conduct was discussed, and a majority of the members were in favor of bringing him to book, both for his invasion of the territory of Spain and for his action in relation to the Englishmen. Congress, too, took up the matter. A motion was made in the House to censure him for his execution of Arbuthnot and Armbrister, and it was debated for weeks, much to the chagrin of the administration, for President Monroe had already settled the matter and England demanded nothing. The war was now over, and Old Hickory came to Washington and remained there all through the debate. He was acquitted, and set out for a tour of the North, being received everywhere with the highest enthusiasm. On Washington's birthday, 1819, a great banquet was given him in New York City, and on that very day a treaty was signed, conveying Florida from Spain to the United States. 9 years later, General Jackson was elected President of the United States by a great popular majority. But in his campaign, and also when he was a candidate for re-election 4 years later, he was denounced by his opponents all over the country as the murderer of the 2 Englishmen. The trial. Before a special court-martial, Fort St. Mark, Florida, April 1818. Major General E.P. Gaines, President. April 27. The court proceeded to the trial of Robert C. Armbruster, a British subject, who, being asked if he had any objections to any one of the members of the court, and replying in the negative, he was arraigned on the following charges and specifications, viz. Charge 1. Aiding, abetting, and comforting the enemy, supplying them with means of war, he being a subject of Great Britain, at peace with the United States, and lately an officer in the British Colonial Marines. Specification first, that the said Robert C. Armbruster did give intelligence of the movements and operations of the American army between the 1st and 20th day of March, 1818, and did excite them, the negroes and Indians, to war against the army of the United States, by sending their warriors to meet and fight the American army, whose government was at peace and friendship with the United States and all her citizens. Charge 2. Leading and commanding the Lower Creeks in carrying on a war against the United States. Specification first, that the said Robert C. Armbruster, a subject of Great Britain, which government was in peace and amity with the United States and all her citizens, did, between the 1st of February and the 20th of March, 1818, levy war against the United States, by assuming a command of the Indians in hostility and open war with the United States, and ordering a party of them to meet the army of the United States, and give them battle, as will appear by his letters to Governor Cameron of New Providence, dated March 20, 1818, which are marked A, B, C, and D, and the testimony of Mr. Peter B. Cook and Captain Lewis, of the schooner Chance. To which charges and specifications he pleaded as follows, viz. To the first charge and specification, not guilty. To the second charge and specification, guilty and justification. The witnesses. April 28. John Lewis Phoenix. About the 5th or 6th of April, 1818, my vessel, and myself having been captured by the prisoner, I was brought to Suwanee as a prisoner. There was an alarm among the negroes and Indians, over some news from Miccosukee. The prisoner appeared active in sending orders and sending a detachment to meet the American army. He appeared to have authority among the Negro leaders, and gave orders for their preparation for war, providing ammunition, etc. The leaders came to him for orders. He furnished them with powder and lead, and recommended to them the making of ball, etc., very quickly. He occasionally dressed in uniform, with his sword, and on the first alarm, which I understood was from Miccosukee by a Negro woman, he put on the uniform. Sometime about the 20th March, 1818, prisoner, with an armed body of Negroes, 24 in number, came on board my vessel, and ordered me to pilot them to Fort St. Mark's, which, he said, he intended to capture before the Americans could get there, threatening to hang me if I did not obey. Do not know by whose authority, and for what purpose, accused came into the country, but I have frequently heard him say he came to attend to Mr. Woodbine's business at the Bay of Tampa. The prisoner. Did I not tell you, when I came on board the schooner Chance, I wished you to pilot me to St. Mark's, as I was informed that 2 Americans, of the names of Hambly and Doyle, were confined there, and I wished to have them relieved from their confinement? You stated that you wanted to get Hamley and Doyle from St. Mark's. I do not know what was your intention in so doing. Did I not tell you that I expected the Indians would fire upon me when arriving at St. Mark's? You did not. You stated that you intended to take the fort in the night, by surprise. Did you see me give ammunition to the Negroes and Indians? And if so, how much, and at what time? I saw you give powder and lead to the Negroes when you came on board, and advised them to make balls. And I saw you give liquor and paint to the Indians. Have you not often heard me say, between the 1st and 20th of April, that I would not have anything to do with the Negroes and Indians, in exciting them to war with the United States? About the 15th of April, I heard you say you would not have a thing to do with the Negroes and Indians. I heard nothing about exciting them to war. Can you read writing? Not English writing. Did you hear me say, when arriving at Suwanee, that I wished to be off immediately for Providence? I did not. After the alarm, you said you wished to be off for Tampa. Did you not say to me, you wished to visit Mr. Arbuthnot, at his store on Suwanee, and get provisions for yourself? I did not. I stated I wanted provisions. Did I send or command any Indians to go and fight the Americans? I did not exactly know that you sent them. The Indians and Negroes were crowding before your door, and you were dividing the paint, etc., among them, and I understood a party was going to march. Did I not give up the schooner to you in charge, as captain? After our return from Suwanee town, you directed me to take charge of her to go to Tampa. John I. Arbuthnot. About the 23rd of March, prisoner came, with a body of Negroes, partly armed, to my father's store on the Suwanee River, and told me then that he had come to do justice to the country, by taking the goods and distributing them among the Negroes and Indians, which I saw the prisoner do. He told me that he had come to the country on Woodbine's business, to see the Negroes righted. Prisoner gave orders to the Negroes, and at his suggestion, a party was sent from Suwanee to meet the Americans, to give them battle, which party returned on meeting the Miccosukee Indians in their flight. The letter, marked A, and referred to in the specification of the second charge, is the writing of the prisoner. A. Robert C. Armbruster to Governor Cameron, Suwanee, near St. Mark's Fort, March 20th, 1818. Sir, I am requested particularly, by all our Indian chiefs, to acquaint your Excellency that the Americans have commenced hostilities with them 2 years ago, and have advanced some considerable distance in this country, and are now making daily progress. They say they sent a number of letters to your Excellency, but have never received one answer, which makes them believe that he never delivered them, and will oblige them much if you will let me know whether he did or not. The purport of the letters were, begging your Excellency to be kind enough to send them down some gunpowder, musket balls, lead, cannon, etc., as they are now completely out of those articles. The Americans may march through the whole territory in a month, and without arms, etc., they must surrender. Hilisayo, or Francis, the Indian chief, the one that was in England, tells me to let your Excellency know that the Prince Regent told him that whenever he wanted ammunition, your Excellency would supply him with as much as he wanted. They beg me to press upon your Excellency's mind to send the above-mentioned articles down by the vessel that brings this to you, as she will sail for this place immediately, and let the Prince Regent know of their situation. Any letters that your Excellency may send down, be good enough to direct to me, as they have great dependence in my writing. Any news that your Excellency may have respecting them and Americans will be doing me a great favor to let me know, that I may send among them. There is now a very large body of Americans and Indians, who I expect will attack us every day, and God only knows how it will be decided. But I must only say, this will be the last effort with us. There has been a body of Indians gone to meet them, and I have sent another party. I hope your Excellency will be pleased to grant the favor they request. I have nothing farther to add, but am, sir, with due respect, your obedient, humble servant, Robert C. Armbruster. The prisoner. Did you hear me say that I came on Woodbine's business? I did. Were not the Negroes alluded to at Arbuthnot's store before I arrived? No, you came with them. Peter B. Cook. Never heard the prisoner give any orders to Negroes or Indians. The prisoner distributed Arbuthnot's goods, and also paint to the Negroes and Indians. Some powder was brought from the vessel to Suwanee by the prisoner, and distributed among the Negroes by Nero. Sometime in March the prisoner took Arbuthnot's schooner, and with an armed party of Negroes, 24 in number, set out for St. Mark's for the purpose of taking Arbuthnot's goods at that place, and stated that he would compel the commandant to deliver them up. On hearing of the approach of the American army, prisoner told the Negroes it was useless to run. If they ran any farther, they would be driven into the sea. Prisoner told me that he had been a lieutenant in the British Army, under Colonel Nichols. Said he was sent by Woodbine to Tampa, to see about those Negroes he had left there. That he had written a letter to Governor Cameron, for ammunition for the Indians, sometime in March. That he had a commission in the Patriot Army, under McGregor, and that he had expected a captaincy. The letters marked A, B, C, D, and referred to in the specification to the second charge, are in the handwriting of the prisoner, and one marked E. B. From Robert C. Armbruster to Major Edward Nichols. Suwanee, near River Apalachicola. Dear Sir, Francis and all the Indian chiefs have requested me particularly to acquaint you that the Americans have commenced hostilities with them these 2 years past, and are making daily progress in their territory, and say they will proceed. That you are the only friend they have in that part of the world, and hope that you will exert yourself in their behalf, and ask for as much assistance as can be had. That the Americans are at the forks of the river Apalachicola. They have written a number of times to England and Providence, but have never received one answer. They expect the man never deliver the letters, but they have full hopes in my writing. They request you would make the Prince Regent acquainted with their deplorable situation. The Americans have been very cruel since they commenced, and I hope you will lose not a single moment in forwarding their views. They say they will be extremely happy to see you. Nothing would give them greater pleasure than to see you out at this time. If they should not see you, to send them in all news and directions, that they may be guided by it. There are about 300 blacks at this place, a few of our bluff people. They beg me to say, they depend on your promises, and expect you are on the way out. They have stuck to the cause, and will always believe in the faith of you, and any directions you may send to me at this place, and I will do what I can. And remain, my dear sir, most truly yours, Robert C. Armbruster. Nota bene. Francis says that you must bring the horses when you come out that you promised, and that his house has been burnt down, and burnt his uniform clothes. R.A. C. From Robert C. Armbruster to Governor Cameron. March 20, 1818. Sir, I am requested particularly by the Indian chiefs to acquaint your Excellency that the Americans have commenced hostilities with them a long time since, and have advanced some distance in their territory, and are still continuing to advance. That they, the chiefs of Florida, have sent repeatedly to your Excellency, and have never received one answer. They suspect Mr. Arbuthnot has never delivered the papers to your Excellency. They wish me to state to you that they are completely out of ammunition, muskets, etc., begging your Excellency will be pleased to send them the articles above mentioned, with a few cannon, as the Americans build their boats so strong that their rifle balls cannot penetrate their sides. The captain of the vessel, who will come down again, I have given orders to make your Excellency acquainted what time the vessel will sail for this place. Your Excellency will, I hope, be good enough to make the Prince Regent acquainted with their situation, and ask for assistance, which they have pressed me very hard to press upon your Excellency's mind, and likewise to send them down what news may be respecting them and the country, which will be a great satisfaction to them. I have the honor to be, etc., Robert C. Armbruster. D. From Robert C. Armbruster to Governor Cameron. Sewanee, 20th March 1818, near Fort St. Marks. Sir, I am requested by Francis and all the Indian chiefs to acquaint your Excellency that they are at war with the Americans, and have been for some time back; that they are in great distress for want of ammunition, balls, arms, etc., and have wrote by Mr. Arbuthnot several times, but they suppose he never delivers them to your Excellency. You will oblige them much to let them know whether he did or did not. I expect the Americans and Indians will attack us daily. I have sent a party of men to oppose them. They beg on me to press on your Excellency's mind to lay the situation of the country before the Prince Regent, and ask for assistance. All news respecting them your Excellency will do a favor to let us know by the first opportunity, that I may make them acquainted. I have given directions to the captain to let your Excellency know when the vessel will sail for this place. I hope your Excellency will be pleased to send them ammunition. I expect, if they do not procure some very shortly, that the Americans will march through the country. I have nothing farther to add. I am, dear sir, your most obedient, humble servant, Robert C. Armbruster. E. From Robert C. Armbruster to Peter B. Cook. Mouth of the river. Dr. Cook, the boat arrived here about 3 o'clock on Thursday. The wind has been ahead ever since I have been down. The rudder of the vessel is in a bad condition, but I will manage to have it done tonight. The wind, I am in hopes, will be fair in the morning, when I will get under way, and make all possible dispatch. I will make old Lewis pilot me safe. If those Indians don't conduct themselves straight, I will use rigorous means with them. Beware of Mr. Dree. I found him on board when I came. Keep a good lookout. I have sent 2 kegs of powder and 1 bar of lead. Yours, etc., R. A. Tuesday, 3 o'clock. The prisoner. Did you not frequently hear me say that I would have nothing to do with the Indians in exciting them to war with the United States? I do not recollect. Are you acquainted with Louis Phoenix, and have you not heard him express ill will against me, in consequence of my wishing him to pilot me to St. Mark's? I never did. Do you know of my sending troops at any time to fight against the United States, and have I not been constantly with you, so that you would have an opportunity of knowing if there had been any sent by me? I have not. They might have been sent without my knowledge. Jacob Harrison. Sometime in March or 1st of April, prisoner took possession of the schooner Chance, with an armed party of negroes, and stated his intention of taking St. Mark's. On his way thither, going ashore, he learned from some Indians that Arbuthnot had gone to St. Mark's, which induced him to return. While the prisoner was on board, he had complete command of the negroes, who considered him their captain. Prisoner took the cargo of the vessel up towards Sewanee, which consisted of, with other articles, 9 kegs of powder and 500 pounds of lead. The evidence being closed, the prisoner was allowed until 5 o'clock this evening to make his defense. The time having expired, he was brought before the court, and said: The prisoner, being arraigned before a special court-martial, upon the following charges, to wit: Charge 1, aiding and abetting and comforting the Indians, supplying them with the means of war, he being a subject of Great Britain, at peace with the United States, and lately an officer in the British Colonial Marines. Charge 2, leading and commanding the Lower Creek Indians in carrying on a war against the United States. To the first charge, the prisoner at the bar pleads not guilty, and as to the second charge he pleads guilty, and justification. The prisoner at the bar feels grateful to this honorable court for their goodness in giving him sufficient time to deliberate and arrange his defense on the above charges. The prisoner at the bar here avails himself of the opportunity of stating to this court that, inasmuch as the testimony which was introduced in this case was very explicit, and went to every point the prisoner could wish, he has nothing farther to offer in his defense, but puts himself on the mercy of the honorable court. The court was cleared, and the proceedings read over to the members by the recorder. After due deliberation, the court finds the prisoner, Robert C. Armbruster, guilty of so much of the specification to the first charge, as follows, viz., and did incite them to war with the United States, by sending their warriors to meet and fight the American army, he being a subject of Great Britain, which government was at peace and friendship with the United States, and all her citizens, but not guilty of the other part of the specification, guilty of the first charge, guilty of the specification of the second charge, and guilty of the second charge. And they sentence the prisoner, Robert C. Armbruster, to suffer death, by being shot, 2/3 of the court concurring therein. One of the members of the court moved reconsideration of his vote on the sentence, and his motion was in the affirmative. A second vote was taken, and the court changed the sentence from death to one that the prisoner receive 50 stripes on his bare back, and be confined with a ball and chain to hard labor, for 12 calendar months. The commanding general, Major General Jackson, approved the finding and first sentence of the court in the case of Robert C. Armbruster, and disapproved the reconsideration of the sentence of the court, saying, "It appears from the evidence and pleading of the prisoner that he did lead and command, within the territory of Spain, being a subject of Great Britain, the Indians in war against the United States, these nations being at peace. It is an established principle of the law of nations that any individual of a nation, making war against the citizens of another nation, they being at peace, forfeits his allegiance, and becomes an outlaw and pirate. This is the case of Robert C. Armbruster, clearly shown by the evidence adduced. The commanding general orders that Brevet Major A. C. W. Fanning, of the Corps of Artillery, will have, between the hours of 8 and 9 o'clock a.m., Robert C. Armbruster to be shot to death, agreeably to the sentence of the court. John James Arbuthnot will be furnished with a passage to Pensacola by the first vessel. April 29. Today at daylight, the prisoner was shot by a detail of troops. End of section 82.
Section 83 of American State Trials, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. American State Trials, Volume 2, by John D. Lawson. Action of Patrick Duffy against George E. Mathewson and others for assault and battery. New York City, 1816. The Narrative. It was an old custom of the sea that whenever a vessel arrived on the equator, where the raw hands and passengers on board have not been before, the seamen, according to the old usage, would proceed to the ceremony of shaving, which is thus performed. One of the crew, the oldest, is habited in a fantastic manner, and with a speaking trumpet in his hand personates Father Neptune. He goes forward to the bow of the vessel, while those who are to be shaved are kept below, and descends until he reaches the water, and from thence ascends on deck, pretending to have emerged from the ocean. He hails the crew with his trumpet, answer is made, and mutual congratulations pass between his godship and the old seaman. He proceeds to order the requisite apparatus for shaving, which generally consists of a piece of iron hoop, a composition for lather made of slush and other offensive matter, and a tub of water. The persons who are to be shaved are then brought on deck, one by one, blindfolded. He demands money or rum as his rightful tax on all those who have never crossed the line. If they pay, they are let go, but if they refuse, they are not. Those who are quiet are shaved light, while those who are refractory are shaved hard. After shaving, Neptune proceeds to swear the novice to divers singular observances, one of which is, that he will never eat brown bread when he can get white. The one shaved is then either immersed in a tub of water, or has a bucket from above poured on his head, and the frolic ends. The sailors of the English ship Thomas, on a voyage from Ireland to America, one day in May, 1816, got up the same stunt when they sighted the banks of Newfoundland. But it did not end here. Patrick Duffy, a passenger who would not pay or treat, and who made quite a row over it, was handled rather roughly, brought an action for assault and battery against the captain and several of the sailors when he reached New York, and the jury awarded him damages. The trial. In the Marine Court of New York City, October 1816, Hon. Henry Wharton, Robert Swanton, John B. Scott, judges. October 17th. This was an action for damages for assault and battery alleged to have been committed on board the British ship Thomas while on the high seas. The defendants were George Mathewson, the captain of the ship, and Richard Clark, George Jenkins, John Marknell, and several other sailors. Mr. Keynes for the plaintiff, Mr. Fay for the defendant. The evidence. Peter Duffy. Am the plaintiff, and was a passenger on board the Thomas, which sailed from Cork for New York last May. About 5 weeks after we sailed, and just as we were in sight of land which they called the Banks, a number of the sailors, disguised in fantastic clothes, ordered the passengers on deck and proceeded to make us go through a ceremony against our will. When we got on deck, Marknell, who was dressed up as Father Neptune, came over the side of the ship. He had evidently been lowered over the side before we got on deck. He had a trumpet in his hand. He hailed the crew in language I did not understand, but I heard him tell them to bring his razor, and some lather, and a cup of water. He then ordered the sailors to bring the passengers before him, and one by one he demanded money or rum as his right when land was sighted. Those who paid up were let go. I refused. When Marknell told his aides to perform the operation, they took hold of me, tied me up, and covered my face with a foul mixture of tar and soap and slush. They scraped it off with an iron hoop, and then dipped me into a tub of water. Before this they made me take a ridiculous oath that I would never eat brown bread when I could get white. James Slavers. Was a passenger on the Thomas and saw the frolic. I got off as I paid $2 tribute as required. Saw them put Duffy through, also half a dozen other passengers who would not pay, including one woman, Anne Jones. The fun was very rough, and I would have not enjoyed it. I preferred to pay the tribute. Cross-examined. Duffy was very mad, but he was the first to refuse to pay. He stayed on deck and watched the others, and after a while seemed much amused and to enjoy it all. They did not drop the woman in the tar water, but poured it over her from a bucket instead. To Mr. Keynes. The victims were blindfolded. The raise was nothing but a hoop. When Neptune came on deck he pretended to have emerged from the ocean, and hailed the crew with his trumpet, to which they responded in a doggerel which they seemed to be very familiar with. When Duffy refused to pay or treat, Father Neptune thundered through his trumpet, "Who are these mortals I see?" One of the sailors responded like this when a passenger refused to pay or treat. "Oh, omnipotent Father, King of the ocean, behold the rebellious sons of terror, who have dared to intrude into thy dominions, refusing to bend before thy divine altar, and to render to thee an accustomed libation. Their beards, O Father, are long, uncouth, and indecent, retained by them in defiance of thy laws, and in derision of thy divinity." Then Neptune called out, "Carry these impious mortals from my presence. Behold their beards, which they dare to retain in despite of my authority. They shall be shaved." And afterwards, "Bring hither that tub, and fill it with sea water." It was done. "Bring forth the long-bearded tribe one by one." The command was obeyed, but Duffy, when it came to his turn, was inclined to be refractory, and resisted. Notice that those that made no fuss were shaved light, while those that resisted were shaved hard. When the ceremony was over, Neptune got over the side of the ship again as though he was descending into the vast deep. Marknell took the part of Neptune, and Captain Mathewson assisted all through the ceremony. Swanton J. To the jury. It was the duty of the master of the ship to treat his passengers with attention and politeness. The captain stood in the same relation to the passengers as the master of an inn or hotel did toward his guests. Having the superintendence of his vessel, the law had invested the captain with the authority necessary for preserving peace and good order. On this occasion, the captain not only failed in treating the plaintiff with a becoming decorum, but countenanced, and actually had some agency in the injury charged in the declaration. The conduct of the defendants toward the plaintiff was highly reprehensible. After taking into consideration the wounded feelings of the plaintiff on the one hand, and the circumstances of the defendants on the other, it will be the duty of the jury to render such a verdict as they consider just and equitable. The jury rendered a verdict in favor of the plaintiff for $46. End of section 83, read by Inkel.
Section 84 of American State Trials, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. American State Trials, Volume 2 by John D. Lawson. The trial of Elizabeth Southard for the murder of William P. Walker, Richmond, Virginia, 1851. A low quarrel and fight in a low lodging house in a southern city in the middle of the last century brought about this trial. There is not much in it to interest the reader either as regards the facts or the result. The interest today is in the distinction which the law of slavery drew between a white person and a person of color. The principal witnesses were objected to on the ground that they were Negroes, but although they had registered themselves as free Negroes, the court found that they were not Negroes at all, but free persons of color who had less than 1/4 Negro blood, which took them out of the servile class in the eye of the law. And because the court found the prisoner was in the same condition as Therese, she was held entitled to be tried as a white person and not as a Negro. The trial. In the Circuit Court of Henrico County, Virginia, criminal term May 1851, Honorable John S. Caskey, Judge. The prisoner was indicted for murder. The indictment containing 5 counts, each charging the blow is given the 12th day of April, 1851, to William P. Walker, and that he lingered till the 22nd and then died. That she struck with an iron griddle in her right hand held upon his head, with an iron griddle in both hands held upon the hind part of his head, with a sharp instrument to the grand jurors unknown in her hands held upon the back part of the head, with a hard instrument to the jurors unknown in her hands held upon the hind part of his head, with an iron griddle in her hands held on his head, gave him divers wounds, fractures, contusions, and bruises. The prisoner was 35 years of age, her hair black and complexion dark. She pleaded not guilty. The following jurors were selected: S. G. Waldrop, R. D. Mitchell, Bernard Brill, William W. Carter, H. B. Ford, Samuel Phillips, Joseph Rennie, William W. Morris, R. G. Walton, William Matthews, James Simpson, Stephen B. Sweeney. John B. Young, Commonwealth Attorney, and B. B. Minor for the Commonwealth. John N. Davis, William Hancock, and R. R. Howison for the prisoner. Mr. Young, I propose to call as witnesses for the Commonwealth Martha Hobson and Rebecca Hobson, and I ask that they be sworn. The prisoner's counsel objected to them as incompetent on the ground that they were persons of color. Mr. Young, then to raise the question, I offer them at once. I shall insist that they are competent as white persons, or at least that they have no more of Negro blood than the accused, and therefore may testify against her. The prisoner's counsel, let them be sworn on their voir dire. Martha Hobson, I have been registered as a free Negro in Henrico County Court, and have here a copy of my register with the seal of the court attached. Rebecca Hobson, I have been registered as a free Negro in the same court, but have not obtained a copy of my register. The Commonwealth's attorney admitted her registry without requiring the production of the record. Mr. Young, I propose to ask Martha Hobson concerning her parentage. The prisoner's counsel, we object. The register is conclusive as to the status of the witness. The court ought not to go behind it. The statute of Virginia requires that a free Negro shall be registered. The county court has complete jurisdiction and ought not to have registered her if she was not a free Negro. It is res judica, and the decision of that court upon the amount of Negro blood may be regarded in the light of a proceeding in rem, and so binding upon all. If she claimed to be of mixed blood, to have less than 1/4 of Negro blood, she might have that question specially decided in her favor by the county court. Mr. Young, this court ought not to be concluded by the register. These persons may have applied for registers at free Negroes merely because they did not wish to be annoyed by questions as to their disabilities and their privileges. The Commonwealth was not a party when they were registered and is not bound by the action of the county court. The Court. The registry is not conclusive. Martha Hobson. My mother was generally called an Englishwoman. She was darker than I am. My father was reputed to be a white man. After I was born, my mother lived with a Negro man as his wife. I lived with them several years. My own husband was generally thought to be a free man of color. His color was light. We came from Little York in Gloucester County. Cross-examined. Never remember to have seen the man that was said to be my father. We were never registered in Gloucester. We only had ourselves registered here because we feared somebody might interfere with us. We associated with colored people in Gloucester. Rebecca is my daughter. The Court. As questions somewhat novel arise in this case, I have thought it best to call in some physicians who are probably experts in matters relating to the distinctions between the human races. The prisoner's counsel. We object to such testimony. If the register be not conclusive, then the proper mode of determining the matter is, not by inspection either of the court or of supposed experts, but by evidence of parentage and pedigree. Our statute looks to this, when it declares that a fourth or more of Negro blood shall exclude. How can the quantity be determined by experts? It can only be known by the parentage. 3 Robinson's Practical 215, State v. Davis, 2 Bailey, SC 558. Mr. Young, the South Carolina case is against you. I think I remember a case from King William which went to the Court of Appeals, and that court decided that inspection was a proper mode of deciding such questions, but I cannot name the case. The Court. I have no doubt I might decide upon my own inspection, and if so, I may avail myself of the knowledge of those better skilled in such inquiries than myself. R. H. Cabell, M.D. I think the studies of a physician tend to give him peculiar skill and knowledge as to the distinctions between the races of men. Comparative anatomy is one of his studies, and that treats of differences in the anatomical structure, as the shape of the skull, the nose, the extremities between the various races. After examining Martha Hobson, I do not find in this woman any evidence of Negro blood. She seems to me to be pure Caucasian. Cross-examined. Do not think it possible for a physician to say accurately how much Negro blood there is in a person, whether a fourth or more. It would be a mere conjecture. This woman's nose is depressed, but she tells me it has been broken. I find nothing in her hair or skin, general appearance indicating Negro blood. Mr. Young, I ask that Dr. Cabal may now be permitted to examine the prisoner. I propose to prove that she has at least as much Negro blood as either of the Hobsons. The prisoner's counsel. We insist that the Commonwealth is bound to try the accused as a white person. The indictment treats her as such. It nowhere alleges that she is a free Negro or mulatto. The case of Young, 2 Virginia cases, 328, decides that when the punishment for an offense is different in a white person and in a free Negro, the indictment against the latter must allege that he is such. The reasoning there applies here. The evidence is different in the 2 cases, and the prisoner may be taken by surprise. Indicted as a white person, she comes expecting to be tried as a white person, and may be unprepared with proof of her white pedigree, which the Commonwealth seeks to assail. The Court. As the punishment in the case of murder is the same for a white person and for a free Negro, the indictment need not make a difference. Yet the Commonwealth ought not to be prevented from showing the competency of her testimony by proving that the prisoner was not one who could object to it. Dr. Cabal recalled after examining Rebecca Hobson and the prisoner. I feel very reluctant to give testimony in this case, and would be glad to be excused. I do not wish to wound the feelings of anyone. I have an opinion on the subject. I think the prisoner has Negro blood. How much I cannot say. Rebecca Hobson also has Negro blood in my opinion, probably rather more than the prisoner. W. D. Haskins, M.D. I think it probable that a physician may have a peculiar skill and be an expert in such matters, though it is not strictly a part of his profession, and extended observations would be necessary to give much skill. My opinion is that all 3 of these women have some Negro blood, the old woman very little. I think the prisoner has more than the witness, Rebecca Hobson. Cross-examined. It is rather the province of the naturalist than of the physician to examine 3 subjects. Probably a physician would not have much more skill than any man of general scientific reading. As to the prisoner, I judge chiefly by the hair and the skin. Her hair is shorter than is usual in white women. Yes, it may have been cut, but it has the appearance of having its natural length. It has also a tendency to curl, not to curl merely, but to a kind of wavy curl. not easily described, but which is different from the curl in the hair of white women. I do not think it possible for a physician to say whether there be a fourth of Negro blood. Albert N. Sneed, M.D. Think it pertains more to the naturalist than the physician to solve this question, but a physician may acquire some peculiar knowledge as to it, not merely from his reading, but from his practice among the two races, as they exist in our society. Am of the opinion all these women have Negro blood. The old woman has the least. Think the other two have about the same quantity. Cross-examined. I judge by the hair and the skin and some other appearances. There is something indescribable in the feeling of the hair and the looks of the skin by which I think the presence of Negro blood may be detected. Cannot say how much. C. Wortham. Am a physician, but do not think I can call myself an expert on this subject. Do not feel competent to give the court instruction and guidance on the question. Other physicians may feel such competency, but I do not. Isaac A. Godden. Was in the county court when Elizabeth Southard was before them in some ease, and the court decided that she was a white person. Here an extract from the record of the county court was exhibited by Mr. Davis. We had sufficient evidence, and I heard. Mr. Young. What Mr. Godden heard from others cannot be given in evidence. The prisoner's counsel. Upon a question of pedigree, hearsay testimony is admissible. This is an exception to the general rule, and we state it thus broadly. If there be a restriction, let the Commonwealth point it out. The Court. The declarations of a member or connection of the prisoner's family may be given in evidence on the question. Jacob Holloway. Knew the prisoner's parents in Hanover County. They were cousins to each other and were both descendants from the Madisons of Caroline. Her father and mother were regularly married and always associated with white people and were very reputable people. They always passed for such. Knew her grandparents who were Madisons. The Madisons were a dark family. Cross-examined. Her grandfather was a Madison. He was dark, but not darker than I have seen people who were known to be white people. I think I have heard, a long time ago, that there was some rumor of a stain in the blood of the family, but I know nothing of it myself. Fleming P. Harris. I knew her parents in Hanover. They were very respectable persons, and were recognized as white people. I have known her father to muster in the militia. May 8. James H. Conway, M.D. Do not think a physician from his professional studies would be more skillful in detecting the differences between the races than any other well-read man. There are naturalists who make this their peculiar study. The object of medical study is to become acquainted with the human system generally, and the causes and cure of its maladies, and in my opinion this may be done to the full extent to which the science now goes, without any peculiar knowledge of the distinctions between the races. L. R. Waring, M.D. Think a physician need not have any peculiar skill in such matters. Cannot claim to be an expert in them, though I have endeavored to attend to the studies of my profession. It must, to a great extent, be matter of conjecture. M. Burton, M.D. Have paid much attention to the differences between the human races. I have done this as a naturalist, and not merely as a physician. Consider myself as having thus acquired peculiar skill and knowledge on the subject. After examining the prisoner and the two witnesses, think the elder woman, Martha Hobson, has no African blood in her. Do not find any evidence of it in her. I think both the other women have Negro blood, and of the two, the prisoner seems to me to have the least. I think neither of them can have as much as 1/4 of Negro blood. Judge Caskey. Even without the testimony of the physicians, I might have decided this question upon my own inspection, but I desired aid, and have certainly derived from the evidence strong confirmation of the view I was inclined at first to take. The question as to the conclusiveness of the register and the effect of the indictment upon the rights of the prisoner have been already considered. Our statute admits as competent witnesses, even against a white person, those free persons of color who have less than 1/4 of Negro or Indian blood. As to the prisoner, I am convinced that she has African blood, but I am equally convinced that she has much less than 1/4, and therefore she is to be tried as a white person. As to Martha Hobson, all that I have heard and seen leaves on my mind the strong opinion that she has no African blood at all, that she is a pure Caucasian, or if her blood be mixed, then she may have a slight tinge, much less than 1/4 of Indian blood. As to Rebecca Hobson, I at first supposed that she had much more Negro blood than the prisoner, but this view has been modified by a closer inspection, and I am now of opinion that she has very little, if any more, and that her quantity of African blood is much less than 1/4. With these views, I must decide that both Martha and Rebecca Hobson are competent witnesses. Evidence for the Commonwealth. John H. Walker. Heard that William Walker had been much hurt at Martha Hobson's. Think I heard it Saturday the 13th of April, 1850. I went to the house and found him sitting up by the chimney side, with his head bound open. Asked him if he would come home with me. He said not then. The next evening he came to my house, and he stayed there until he died, on the Monday week after he was hurt. He sometimes walked about for a day or two after coming to my house, but did not talk much. He seemed in a stupor several days before he died. Cross-examined. He was my cousin. We did not have much to do with each other. He would take sprees sometimes, but I did not think he was then more violent than other men. He was a very peaceable man when sober. J. Mull. A few days after this affair happened, saw William Walker walking on the other side of the bridge over the creek that runs through Rockets. He had his head tied up. I joined him and we talked some, asked him how he got hurt, and he said he got it skylarking at Martha Hobson's. He went on to his brother's. Don't think I saw him out afterwards. Cross-examined. Skylarking is a phrase often used by sailors. It means pretty rough play, as if we were to take all the tables, desks, books, and inkstands in this room and throw them all about in confusion. Knew William Walker. He got drunk sometimes, but when sober he was quiet. Martha Hobson. The night this thing happened, Betsy Southard was at my house, and so was William Walker. Sometime after dark, we took something to drink. They commenced romping about the room. They proposed to dance. I told them I didn't believe they could dance as they did in old times. They romped about the floor, and after a while Bill Walker went out and got one of the watchmen to come. When he came, he asked what was the matter. We were all quiet. The watchman said to Bill Walker, "If you come and make a fuss again, I will put you up the chimney." When the watchman went away, Betsy asked Walker what he brought the watchman for. He said for her. Then she proposed to send out for some liquor, and said if he wouldn't pay for it, she would. The liquor came, and after a while they played again, and Betsy threw him down on the floor. They were down some time, and then they got up and had another wrestle, and she threw him again. Then she got up, and I saw her go off, her body half bent. Here the witness showed the position, towards the fireplace. He ran after her and kicked her in the mouth, Betsy said, so hard it shook every tooth in her head. Then she said, "Oh, damn you, are you up to that?" And she caught up this griddle and struck him on the back of the head as he turned off. He fell right down and lay still. I said, "Lord, Betsy, you've killed him." She said, "Oh, no, he ain't dead. Let him bleed a little." After a while he came to. I put some soot from the chimney on his head and bound it up with a bandage, and he laid down on the bed. Cross-examined. William Walker lived with me as my husband. We were never married. We all drank that evening, I as well as the rest. Don't know why Walker went for the watchman. He didn't like Betsy much anyhow, though they were playing at first, but I think he was getting very mad when she threw him down. Think he was mad when he ran after her to the chimney. He ran very fast. After he kicked her, he turned off to the right. There was a table the way he turned. Under it there was a skillet with a handle to it, and there was some other things. When they fell down the first time, they stayed down, it seemed to me, perhaps a quarter of an hour. They said nothing all the time. Had once a little difficulty with Elizabeth Southard, but nothing to speak of. Rebecca was present most of the time. Rebecca Hobson was out of the house the first part of the night. When I came in, they were dancing and playing about the floor. I drank, I think, 1 glass. Walker went out and got the watchman, but when he came, we were not doing anything, and he went away. Betsy and Walker wrestled, and she threw him. Only saw her throw him once. She had said to me, "Pull my cape down," and I pulled it down. While they were on the floor, he kicked her in the mouth, and then she ran and got this griddle and struck him on the head. He fell down and seemed dead, but came to. When she took the griddle, she said, "Oh, are you up to that?" Didn't hear her say anything more. Cross-examined. Did not see Walker run up to the chimney place and kick Betsy in the mouth. Did not see her go off half bent to the fireplace. I did not see Mother put any soot on his head. There was a skillet under the table near him. There was an axe in the house. I think it was near the door. They fell nearer to the door than to the fireplace. Walker was sometimes very violent. He had choked my mother a few days before. He was not a large man. Remember some difficulty between Mother and Betsy. L.R. Waring, M.D., was called to see William Walker before his death. Found him in a state approaching stupor. There was a wound on his head which penetrated through the scalp. The skull was also cut through, and a piece of the bone driven in upon the brain. Used the terrapin to elevate this fragment of bone. Had little hope of his life. He continued to live, generally in a comatose state, until Monday, when he died. The blow, I think, might have been given with an instrument like the griddle, and must have been struck with considerable force. Have no doubt the blow caused his death. John H. Walker, recalled. On Wednesday evening, William Walker was much worse and was put to bed. He said he did not think he should ever get well. He seemed in earnest when he said it. Asked him if I should send for a doctor, and he said yes. The prosecuting attorney. Upon this foundation and the former evidence, I now propose to give the declaration of the deceased as to the person who struck the blow and its attending circumstances to the jury. The prisoner's counsel. We shall oppose this not only on the ground that, according to the common law decisions, the foundation is not sufficient, but on the farther ground that the Constitution of the United States forbids the introduction of dying declarations by necessary interference from Article 6 Amendment. How can the accused be confronted with the witnesses against him if these declarations of a man not under oath and not subject to cross-examination can be received? And so, Judge Baxter of Georgia has recently ruled out dying declarations in a case reported in Washington, Georgia, Gazette, and in the Richmond Times, May 8, 1851. Hunter Hill's case does not shut up this question. There, nothing was relied upon by the prisoner's counsel, except the Bill of Rights of Virginia. The Constitution of the United States was not spoken of, but if dying declarations can be received at all, the rule now approved will exclude them in this case. It is not enough that the deceased thought he should never recover. Cowan and Hill's notes to Phillips, 607-608. He must think death to be impending, so that his mind is solemnized by the thought. Mr. Minor, the Bill of Rights of Virginia is broader in its language than the Constitution of the U.S. Compare Article 8 Bill of Rights with Article 6 Amendment. Constitution. So the General Court, in deciding that the Bill of Rights did not exclude dying declarations, necessarily decide that the Constitution of the U.S. did not. The rule only requires that the deceased shall believe he must die soon. This was the case here. The Court. I do not think Article 6 of the amendments to the Constitution of the United States applies at all to the state courts, or gives any rule to them. The words are, an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law. This must refer to the United States courts. But while I am bound by the decision in Hunter Hill's case, and am perfectly satisfied of the propriety of admitted dying declarations to a jury, yet, in the case at bar, I do not think the mind of the deceased was so bereft of all hope of life, and so impressed as to the solemnity of his position as to make his declarations proper evidence. I therefore exclude them. Evidence for the defense. William F. Carvado. The morning after this affair, I heard Isaiah Walker say his brother was killed. Went to the house and peeped through a window, and saw William Walker sitting up in bed. Asked him who struck him. He said a woman upstairs. I went part of the way upstairs, just high enough to see, and I saw a woman lying on the floor, wrapped up in old clothes or something of the kind. I could not tell who she was. A man named Peter Bell was up there, just buttoning on his clothes. Saw no other woman. Joseph Holloway. Knew the prisoner in Hanover, and never heard anything against her. She was always considered of a peaceable disposition. She stayed with my mother sometimes, and I heard her speak of her favorably. Have known nothing of her since she was in Richmond. Fleming P. Harris. Have seen the prisoner in Hanover, where her parents lived. Never heard anything against her there, but in the last 4 or 5 years she has been beyond the reach of my observation. May 9. The argument before the jury commenced at 9 and closed at 12:30. The jury retired and in half an hour returned with a verdict of guilty of voluntary manslaughter. The prisoner was sentenced to confinement in the penitentiary for 1 year. End of section 84.
Section 85 of American State Trials, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. American State Trials, Volume 2, by John D. Lawson. Trial of John Dayton and Thomas Dyer for larceny, New York City, 1817. The narrative. A sailing vessel carrying a cargo of flour, butter, honey, and other provisions capsized one afternoon in a gale in the Hudson River opposite New York City. Most of the cargo was on deck and floated upon the water. A sailor named Dyer suggested to several of his companions that they go out and pick up what property they could, which proposition was accepted. They succeeded in bringing a lot of it to shore, and transporting it over to Long Island, where one of them operated a store, and did a good business until interrupted by the police, who arrested the men and confiscated the stock. Tried in New York City for stealing the things which they took from the water, their lawyers contended that the finder was not a thief, but the court ruled that the things that they took were not lost, and that therefore they were not finders, and they were convicted. The trial. In the Court of General Sessions, New York City, November 1817. Honorable Jacob Ratcliffe, Mayor. Thomas R. Smith, Anthony L. Underhill, Alderman. November 3rd. John Dayton, Thomas Dyer, Gideon Wagner, and Samuel Legg had been indicted for grand larceny, in stealing 40 barrels of flour, 2 firkins of butter, 2 hives of honey, 3 tierces of cheese, and 1 chest containing 3 coats, and 6 pairs of pantaloons, of the value of $443, the property of James Taylor on October 6, 1817. The prisoners pleaded not guilty. Hugh Maxwell, District Attorney for the people, Mr. Scott, Mr. Gardiner, and Mr. Price for the prisoners. The evidence. James Taylor. I was captain and owner of the sloop Superior. On the morning of the 6th of October last, the sloop left Catskill about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, while between Fort Washington and Sputing, Duval Creek, about 10 miles from New York, a violent gale of wind went over her. The cargo on the deck, consisting of flour, butter, honey, potash, and other articles, was swept off. The prisoners with others on the east shore, seeing the situation of the vessel, put off in boats to save such of the cargo as they could. Some floated on the shore, and some was taken up by the boatmen, judging from the direction of the wind, that such of the articles as would float would be driven on the eastern shore and preserved by the people there, and continued with the vessel, and did not, until the Friday following, go after the property. On that day I found a part of the property on the shore, and in 15 days after the accident, found 12 barrels of the flour in the police office. Samuel Legg. I went along with the prisoners at the suggestion of Dyer when we saw the sloop go over. After we picked the things up from the water, Dayton told me that he intended to keep a part of the property as a compensation for his trouble, stating that the owner, in such cases, was generally illiberal, and would not allow near as much as the law allowed, which was half the property. In my presence, he concealed 4 barrels of flour, a firkin of butter, and a hive of honey, by covering it with stones and bushes. Dyer also took his part of the property, removed it from the place where it came on shore, and sealed it. Dyer with Dayton hired Wagner to come up with a schooner in the night and convey the property to the city. Dayton was a fisherman, but after getting the goods he opened a flour warehouse at Corlear's Hook, and continued merchandising until the police arrested him. Mr. Scott contended that the property, having been lost from the vessel, the possession was legally obtained by the prisoner, no trespass was committed, and it did not appear, from the evidence, that a felonious intent existed in his mind at the time of the original taking. Mr. Price cited the case of the People v. Anderson, 14 Johns 294, the marginal note in which is that a bona fide finder of an article lost, as a trunk containing goods, lost from a stage-coach, and found on the highway, is not guilty of larceny by any subsequent act in secreting or appropriating to his own use the article found. Mr. Maxwell contended that the owner had, continually, a constructive possession, and never intended to abandon his possession. The mayor charged the jury that the case read from Johnson was not analogous to the case submitted for their determination. There, the property, to every legal intent, was lost to the owner, and came into possession of the prisoner by finding. But in this case, according to the testimony, the property was not lost, it was merely separated from the owner by an accident. He did not lose his control over it, and, at no point in time, intended to abandon his right of recovering possession. Here was a vessel in distress, the owner was present, and had the property in his power, and never intended to abandon his control over it. Besides, it was notorious that the property came from the vessel. In cases of fire in our city, where property is thrown promiscuously in the street, and is often, for a time, beyond the owner's reach, it has always been held, in this court, that it is a felony to take such property with a fraudulent intent. It has never been considered that property, which has been wrested from the owner by accident, is so far lost that it is not the subject of a felony. The court cannot conceive the difference in principle between cases of that description so frequently tried in this court, and the present case. In point of moral turpitude, this must surely be ranked among offences the most atrocious, for it is taking advantage of the distress of others to purloin their property under colour of rendering assistance. On the whole, the only question for the jury is, whether at the time the prisoner took this property, he did it with the fraudulent intent of converting it to his own use, without the consent of the owner. The jury, in determining this question, have a right to recur to the conduct of the prisoner subsequent to such taking, and to all the circumstances in the case as detailed in the testimony. Should the jury believe that the prisoner, at the time he took this property from the water, intended to convert it to his own use, it will be their duty to convict him, but if he intended to preserve it for the owner, it will be their duty to acquit him. The jury found the prisoners guilty, but recommended Dyer to mercy. The court sentenced Dayton to the state prison for 7 years, and the sentence of Dyer was suspended. End of section 85, read by Inkel. End of American State Trials, Volume 2, by John D. Lawson.